Yo, this is your boy Ricky Leaky. You already know the deal. Hit me up on Twitter at Ricky Leaky. You can also find me on the Crackbacks podcast. Been a little slow, obviously difficult to get together recently with all the coronavirus stuff going on. Depending on how serious you take it or not, you obviously have to still be considerate for others. And I know me personally, I had some friends that did get coronavirus. I don't think I have it. I did get tested. I will find out soon. But to keep it safe, won't be recording in studio like we've been planning on doing for a little bit. I'll be ready to go. I feel great. Hope the guys feel great to start getting this going in studio very soon. But I actually want to bring you today one of the very first mini Crackback episodes before we record again tomorrow. Just some of the things I want to get into today. Real important going on right now. Obviously, you guys know I am going to be your new Jets insider. Anytime there's any Jets news and notes, I'm going to be all over it. So I want to talk the Jamal Adams situation. Also going to talk, I know if you heard my previous podcast, because, we used to do the podcast. Now we're switching all video, which I guess you consider that a video podcast. I did an AFC North prediction. We're going to go AFC South. And last but not least, I want to talk about the Cam Newton situation. Just what I see in it, things that confuse me. Obviously, want to get your take on it. Always, any questions, any comments on this video, hit me up on Twitter at Ricky Leaky. All my fans here watching, I really appreciate it. Hope to bring you more content soon. I promise it is coming. But back to my first point here. Let's talk about the Jamal Adams contract situation. I love Jamal. I actually have Jamal's jersey, but I think this is getting pretty crazy. I think Jamal, number one, he needs a reality check. He's not a corner. It's not a foundational position. And as good as he is, like anytime, he goes on, you see him on ESPN, they give his stats. They're all linebacker numbers. The sacks, the tackles for loss, the force, which is great. But I also think part of the reason he's getting that is because of Greg Williams' scheme. We have no pass rushers. We have no corners. What does Greg Williams do? I'm going to line up my best player up front, and I'm going to blitz the hell out of teams and stop plays before they happen, because we can't stop anyone without that. So not only do we have needs at pass rusher and corner, he's neither one of those, and he thinks he puts himself up there with the McCaffreys and all of the draft class, which is great. He's a great player, don't get me wrong, but he's not Ed Reed, he's not Troy Polamalu, he's not that level safety. Just looking at their first 3 years, Ed Reed had 21 picks his first 3 years. But then you're saying, Enrique, he's a strong safety. He's not a free safety. Troy Polamalu is the strong safety, excuse me. And you're right. But even Troy Polamalu had 7 picks. Obviously Jamal's got more sacks, 12 sacks, where I believe Troy had about 3 or 4 tackles for loss. Jamal probably double his tackles for loss. But I think most of that was last year, and most of that's because of Greg Williams' scheme, because he knows that we really don't have anybody to rush the passer. So, looking at the film, I think in the passing game, he doesn't even really cover that much ground. He's faster in the running game. And he's a great player. He's somebody you want on the defense, but 2 things have happened, right? The previous GM, Darnold's rookie year, went on some crazy spending spree. Almost signed Anthony Barr, too, but still went on some crazy spending spree. Overpaid to reset the market on a middle linebacker. Mosley's a great player, but again, he's not a foundational player. You can draft a guy who plays at replacement level to replace Mosley and pay him the rookie minimum. The Jets last year didn't even have Mosley the entire year, and they were still a middle-of-the-pack defense, which they're going to be again this year, because that's the other thing. Jamal is not a complete game changer like those 2 guys are. Jamal's a great player. I think he was first-team All-Pro because the Honey Badger was kind of banged up, didn't play the whole year, and Derwin James wasn't playing. Because I think if you ask any scout, any of the coaches in the league, injury aside, they're not going to take Jamal Adams as their first safety. There's only really two other guys I would say for sure, but that doesn't mean that he's the must keep, right? But obviously a good franchise, great franchises, they keep their own players. You took a guy 6th overall. He was everything you'd hope he'd become for the 6th overall pick, if not more. So you reward that guy. You keep him. And I agree with that if the GM was actually the guy that drafted him. The GM came in here to fix a mess by the previous GM. And the only way we're going to get better is if we get multiple assets for him. I do think his trade value is declining a little bit. I think it's because obviously he now wants to leave. I don't understand the idea of him giving all these teams. I mean, he gave out playoff teams. Every player who wants to get traded wants to go to a playoff team. I think that was pretty irrelevant to drop the names of the teams he wanted to go on because it's not going to do anything. All that really matters is where the Jets can find the best trade partner. And, we can have another topic in terms of who are the best. We can have another show, and have a topic in terms of who are the best trade partners for him. It's great. I don't want to get into that. Long story short, if we can get a first and some kind of starter, I'll take that all day. And hopefully now with this new GM, we can revert to what good franchises do. And, if we have any good players in this draft, I would assume we take care of them. But unfortunately, with the Jets' cap situation, yes, they will have a lot of cap space after they make some cuts next year. But it's still way too much money spent on the middle of the defense. And those guys don't make the kind of impact. And then obviously looking back at that Ravens defense, they also had Ray Lewis, who's a middle linebacker. They paid a lot for the Mike linebacker. But it was a different NFL back then. Ray Lewis, obviously he was getting old, but towards the end of his career, offensive coordinators got the idea that he can't cover in space. He can't cover running backs and tight ends, and he was getting abused. In the Ravens playoff run, he led the Ravens in tackles, but the way I saw it, every team was running plays towards him because they knew he was the one who couldn't cover. So he was tackling the guy after they got a first down. Was it an impactful tackle? I don't think so, but it is what it is. And at the end of the day, I think the Jets need to do what's best for the long-term future. This is not a win-now team. My take, out of corner, trade the guy. All right, now going into the AFC South predictions. I like to always start in reverse order. I think this is going to be, maybe exciting is not the right word, but there's going to be a lot of parity in this division because all the teams are very close. You can make a case for one to the other. Really, not really last place, but teams 1 through 3 to interchange, slide back and forth based on whatever happens during the season because they really are that close. But in its own class, in 4th place is the Jacksonville Jaguars. I do think a lot of people are overlooking what Gardner Minshew did. I think he was very impressive when he played. But based on the draft, Jacksonville really just invested on the defense. They weren't really thinking about the offense. So really what it says to me is that Jacksonville's probably going to fire their coach this year. They want to bring in somebody new next year with a new quarterback. Presumably, everyone's saying Trevor Lawrence, could be Justin Fields, could even be that kid Trey Lance from North Dakota State. Obviously, way too early to tell. But if we don't have a college football season, I would guess, based on what the scouts are saying now, would stay the same going into the draft, that Trevor Lawrence would essentially be the number 1 overall player. It's going to be a very crazy draft because you're going to have all these top-tier players that are not going to play for a year, so you don't know who you're overdrafting or underdrafting. And even look at a guy like Jamar Chase, who you could make the case could go 3rd overall after the top 2 quarterbacks, based on his performance. So it's going to be real tricky to see what happens in terms of where the Jacksonville Jaguars move from there. But let's not lie to ourselves here. This team is tanking. I do like DJ Chark. They do have some good pieces. I actually think they reached on that corner in the draft, the kid from Florida. I can't remember his name. I think they did reach on him a little bit. He's definitely not Jalen Ramsey. It made sense to trade A.J. Bouye. At first, I thought that was a steal for the Broncos. But my buddies who are, I shouldn't say I have buddies because you just don't know that many Jacksonville fans, right? So my buddy, who's a Jacksonville fan, he watches the team real close, and he was telling me that A.J. Bouye hasn't really been the same since the year they went to the AFC Championship game. So that could have actually been a good deal for them to trade him for the value they got to Denver. But either way, this is a tanking team, last place. The offensive line has some issues. The defense keep them in there. They're not going to be 0-16. I don't think they're that bad, but in terms of the division, they're going to be on the outside looking in, of course, and definitely in last place. So third place, this was a tough one for me, but I'm going to go with Houston. I really think that Bill O'Brien's doing everything he can to hinder Deshaun Watson's development. I don't like what he's doing out there. It makes no sense how you're going to ruin your quarterback's development by taking away his best wide receiver when he really hasn't even hit his prime yet. Anybody can debate how good you think Deshaun Watson really is. I think he's really good, but I also think the media overrates him. But he's a guy you can win football games with. He's a guy that, with the right team around him, can end up in Canton because he does have special skills. And I think what he did in college against Alabama when they were at the very top kind of just opened up people's eyes and said, hey, this kid can play. Bears should feel ashamed of themselves for not having him. I can understand that Patrick Mahomes passing on him. He played in the Big 12. And really, he worked the best in Andy Reid's offense. I just didn't see a reason why you would take, especially in the same conference. These guys played each other in the same conference. You take Trubisky. When I think Trubisky really got drafted second overall because of the one game against FSU that he let a comeback on when FSU was already on the decline. So obviously, Chicago's probably set their franchise back about a good 5-10 years because of that. But Houston has a good quarterback. I do like that they got Larry Tunsil now. They did give up a lot for him, but franchise left tackles like that do not fall off trees. So we'll see what happens there. David Johnson, is he even going to play 14 games? I'm not sure. And the defense, they just have their best players are old. What's left in J.J. Watt? They don't really have much of a secondary. Could they be a third-place team that possibly gets into the playoffs with this new format? Could be. I'm not counting on it, but it could be. Every year there's always a team that didn't make the playoffs last year that makes the playoffs the next year, and vice versa. A team that made the playoffs last year is going to miss it. And my pick to actually miss the playoffs is this team or the next one that I'm going to say, but they're both in the AFC South. So the next team that I'm going to go with in terms of second place in the division would be the Tennessee Titans. I don't think they had a great offseason. I'm just sticking to the fact that Vrabel and that coaching staff will stick to the identity that made them good, made them catch fire, get that playoff run. And that's really the thing with that type of identity and that type of player like Derrick Henry. He always catches fire late when the defenses are kind of worn out and he can just be real physical with them. When it gets kind of colder, it gets a little harder to hit. That's why typically in the beginning of the year, they don't really start as hot as you would like them to, which is why I just don't see them winning the division. And on top of that, they overpaid Ryan Tannehill, let Conklin go. When the bread and butter of this team was the offensive line and the running game, they still have Luan, who obviously you want the left tackle, but Conklin, he's a special player at right tackle. I mean, Cleveland paid him left tackle money when he's a right tackle, and then also drafted 10th overall another right tackle when they have no left tackle and they have a righty quarterback that can't move. But that's another topic for another day. I just don't see them repeating that kind of performance from last year because everybody knows it's coming now. It's different when you're no longer hunting, you're being the hunted. And they've taken away from their strengths. Their defense should still be solid, which is why they're going to be second place. They're going to have a top 10 defense. They're going to get some turnovers. And who knows what Tannehill we're going to get. Tannehill had a good season in Miami. They went 10-6. But what did he do the next year? Obviously, he's been hurt. But who's to say he's not going to get hurt again? I don't really understand how some fans specifically have this idea that magically, in football specifically, this other sports is different, but in football specifically, how somebody can go from being injured all the time to just magically not be injured no more. I tell my friends that are Dolphins fans, before the Dolphins even drafted him, I don't think Tua is going to be very good. Not because of anything he's done on the field, but because you have a guy who shattered, tore, whatever verbiage you want to use for what happened to his hip. Something bad happened to his hip and needed surgery. 2 ankle surgeries, history of concussions. And now bigger, faster, stronger guys are going to hit you. It just makes no sense to me how, you would basically bet your franchise on that. Everybody likes to, and then you compare to the Drew Brees situation. Miami obviously passed up on Drew Brees, which is honestly part of the reason why I think they couldn't pass on Tua. But Drew Brees had it was a shoulder issue. It was not something that would hit that could literally have him not stand properly. It wasn't ankles, and it wasn't like he had that huge injury history back in Purdue. So I think it's completely different situations. But let's not veer off track here. Tennessee, second place. I like where they're at. I really only have one team in this division making the playoffs, the winner of the division. But with an extra team, wouldn't be surprised if it's 2, but I'm still going to go with 1. First place team to me is the Indianapolis Colts. This roster with Andrew Luck is a Super Bowl contender, not just a division champion. I think the biggest wild card is obviously Drew Brees, but let's do this exercise where, quarterback aside, adding the coaching staff, who has the best roster top to bottom in the AFC South? I think it's the Colts, and it's not even close. Chris Ballard and his crew have done a phenomenal job drafting the last few years. Inarguably a top 3 offensive line in the NFL, something Phillip Rivers has never had. And yes, he struggled last year when their offensive line struggled and he's not a mobile quarterback. But the year before, did we forget what they did just the year before? I'm not saying he's going to get exactly those numbers, but it's not far off. Everybody likes to talk about age, but the NFL now is made for quarterbacks to play longer. A quarterback who's 36 is not an old quarterback anymore. That's why this nonsense about the decline of Aaron Rodgers is completely disrespectful. But again, let's not veer off track. First place, I got the Colts. I'm not super high on that wide receiver they took, Pittman Jr., but he's not going to be a wide receiver 1, so I actually think it's going to work. They already have a wide receiver 1. He's going to be kind of that red zone target, almost like a glorified tight end playing wide receiver. That's really what he looks like to me. But either way, that fit, I like that fit. Darius Leonard should be healthy the entire year, the captain of that defense. See, Darius Leonard, a guy drafted by the Colts, that's a guy you're going to pay. He's a middle linebacker. As I said earlier, not maybe a premium position, but it's a guy that you drafted that has completely exceeded expectations based on where he was drafted. Also coming from a small school. I mean, kudos to the Colts scouts. They really hit that. And really, with a lot of their draft picks, they've been doing very, very well. So for the AFC South, I got Phillip Rivers, Frank Wright taking the AFC South. I'm going to go with 10-6. Last topic I want to get into today is Cam Newton. So I'm very intrigued by this. Obviously, I'll have a separate segment on my AFC East predictions, but this is just specifically talking about Cam. You've probably heard me on a Crackbacks podcast still saying that I'm going to take the Patriots to win the division. I thought that with Jarrett Stidham. My mind has not changed with Cam Newton, but what I'm going to say is that I'm not higher on the Patriots now because they got Cam Newton. I originally was at first, so I'm going to take you through my entire thought process with that, right? So at first, this is what I was thinking. Obviously, being a Jets fan, Belichick has beat us the entire time. Belichick did it again. You have a team that just lost Tom Brady, and for less money than they paid for that fine for filming the Bengals and the Browns, they get Cam Newton to go with that defense. And more importantly, which is what's also going unnoticed, which is why I do think Belichick plays chess while everybody plays checkers, if not Jenga. I don't know if you can get that analogy. But now, starting with the Dolphins week 1, all NFL teams, specifically in the first 3 weeks, but obviously through the whole year, they've had a game plan in place for how they're going to defend the Patriots offense, Jarrett Stidham. Now, we have a month till training camp. Season starts in September. And all these teams have to just scrap, Jets included, have to scrap their entire game plan. The entire game plan, scrap, because now you're going to have a different quarterback bringing a different dynamic. And especially with the Patriots' position, in terms of where their skill position talent is at, where their offensive line is at, Cam Newton's actually a good fit because he's a guy that you don't really want is not the right word. You don't really need elite skill position players on the outside because he's also not that kind of guy that's going to really use them to their max potential. So they're going to continue to run the ball like they were doing a lot last year. And now they're just going to have an extra runner with Cam Newton, but they're not going to run him a lot. They're going to use a threat of running him a lot. He's been hit 300 times more than the next closest quarterback since he's been in the league in 2011. They're not going to be running zone read all the time like with Lamar Jackson. It'd be foolish. We just talked about the injuries with these other guys. Last 3 years, what has Cam Newton had? 2 shoulder surgeries, had the Liz Frank injury, had to get foot surgery. So a mobile quarterback that already struggled with accuracy is coming off 2 shoulder surgeries and Liz Frank. I mean, what I think diving into the whole situation, the contract that Bill Belichick gave him tells me that Belichick kind of agrees with me that he doesn't know what he's getting. Because I think if Belichick knew, hey, we're getting this guy who's going to be the 2017 MVP, he's my guy, he would have been signed a lot sooner. Now let's talk about why he hasn't been signed sooner, right? So this is where I think it is a little unfair for him because Carolina definitely screwed him over. By the time Carolina released him, a lot of the quarterback-needy teams already figured out their situation at quarterback. So it really only left New England. Adam Schefter reported that New England was the only team that was calling, post this whole corona thing where now you can bring in players for physicals and rehab and whatnot. New England was the only team that called. So to me, what does that say? How is the media in Vegas now moving the Patriots to a Super Bowl contender, clear out favorite to win the division when they sign a guy that nobody wanted? It makes no sense to me, right? And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, it's our faith in Belichick. Solely because of Randy Moss in 2007. Because the track record after that, it's not the greatest. Albert Hainsworth, Ocho Cinco, Antonio Brown. He's not 100% in terms of bringing in vets to the program and turning around their careers. He just did it so great with Randy Moss, and then the next year without Brady in 2008 goes 11-5 with Matt Castle. So we're naturally inclined to say, hey, he's going to figure it out. And my take is I don't think they're going to figure it out that much on offense. They just don't need much on offense because they already have an elite defense. And they're going to win 9-10 games on just defense and special teams alone. The Jets did it. They went to back-to-back AFC Championship games on defense and special teams with Rex Ryan as coach. If they can do that, the Patriots, who are actually going to win the division, so you're also giving them a home game to start off the playoffs, they can definitely win a playoff game with Cam Newton or with Jarrett Stidham. It doesn't matter. So basically, in the macro view, we are overrating Cam Newton, but I think the Patriots should have already been favorites just because when have we ever seen the Bills perform when they're expected to? We just haven't seen it. So do I think it's a good signing for the Patriots? Absolutely, because it's low risk, and of course there's a high reward. Is there a potential that you can get the MVP 2015 Cam Newton? Yeah, but it's 1%. So that's really my take on that. Still taking the Patriots to win the division. But I'm just not so sure Cam is going to just light the world on fire like everybody likes to think and give Belichick the benefit of the doubt. But that's it for today. Thanks for listening to the episode. We will be on live via Zoom tomorrow. Hope to see you guys there. Drop some comments below. Let me know what you think of this video. Definitely going to be dropping some more mini content for you in the midst of the week with more sports topics coming along. Definitely would love to get your feedback. Again, hit me up on Twitter at RickyLeaky. We're going to talk some baseball season soon. Can't wait. Football season's coming back. Sports are coming back in general. Let's all get excited. Peace.